All right, guys, this is Chris Stadler, and we're here to talk about why honest companies are more successful. All right, I'm Chris Stadler, and my goal is to bring clarity, order, and momentum to visionary companies by building disciplined teams, aligning culture with purpose, and making sense of complex processes and organizations so that visionary leaders can lead and companies can grow without excuses. Basically, I'm like a high level project manager who gets people focused, communicating, and moving. Let's talk about why an honest culture matters. So, I love working with honest cultures. And what I mean by that is that cultures who can be really transparent about and really logical and really essentially truthful. And in this day and age, it's not always popular, but ultimately people who are consistent and not hypocritical are going to be the ones who succeed. They're the most trustworthy. And so, all right. So there are a lot of trends, a lot of different philosophies that are at cross purposes with your ability to fulfill your mission. And so there are a lot of things like there's the idea of the triple bottom line, people, planet, profits, that kind of thing. And I think those are for bigger companies who need to get government contracts and need to, they're very PR oriented. I think a lot of those companies, they can do that. I think there's some dishonesty in that because if you say your mission is one thing, but then you're like, oh yeah, but triple bottom line, well, so now you have different missions that don't necessarily align with that one mission that you have. If you're serious about serving your customers, and that is your goal to do that, like that's one of your, or it's like, hey, we want to make a profit and we're going to do this by serving customers well, let's say, that's pretty well aligned, right? That's a pretty good alignment of mission and what you're trying to do. What's not so good of an alignment is when you say, okay, that's what we're going to do, and then you say, oh, and then the environment is our main focus too. Oh yeah, and then people are our main focus too, and it's very disorganized and it's dishonest. And so a lot of times what we see though in good companies, good honest companies, is they wrestle with that. They're like, yeah, that's dishonest. I can't have all those things. I was in a brand workshop one time with a company, and it was an investing. It was a working capital and lender, right? Essentially, for business to business, working capital lending. They did some good stuff. They had some good products, and they helped a lot of businesses grow. But one time in the meeting, their CEO, he was like, among our values, we're doing we're doing a rebrand, right? That's what we're doing, and we're doing a rebrand, and this we're talking through the values, and I'm like the guy who's gonna smell any kind of like hypocrisy or disagreement and tell people. And so he was like, "Oh, well, we have to have diversity in there too. We got to have that." And I'm like, "All right." And it's a Canadian company, so I don't know if there's different pressure there. But he was like, "We got to have diversity in there too." And I was like, "Okay, wait a second. Tell me what you mean by that, and tell me how that helps you achieve your mission, or tell me like tie it in, right? Tie it in somehow, and give me some examples of what you guys are doing to achieve diversity and how it actually helps you achieve is it consistent with your other values? Why is diversity important to you?" And immediately he was like, "Yeah, it's not. Let's not have that." So, because ultimately it's like, can you love people without having diversity? Yeah. Does not having diversity mean you're somehow racist or you hate people of a certain type? I don't know. No, it doesn't mean that at all. Right. And just because culture tells you it means that doesn't mean it means that. And so being able to focus. So now, smarter companies, I think that's just an anecdote, but smarter companies, I think, honest, smart companies are like, okay, well, our main job here is to make money. That is kind of the main job, right? We have to be profitable. And so, but it's not your goal, right? Your goal is something, it's not just like profitability. That's our goal. Well, then that's every company's goal, right? You want to be profitable, of course. You want cash flow, but your mission is how you're going to do that. And so you're like, okay, well, how we're going to do that is we're going to serve people well in some way. That's usually what you're doing is you're serving people in some way. And so now from there, you're like, okay, well then what's consistent with our values, how we want to do things. And you may say like, hey, we want to do things in a way that's going to preserve our community. And part of that means that we're not going to pour toxic sludge into the sewers. We're going to we're going to obey the laws. We're going to do the right thing. But what does the right thing mean? And so you're thinking about those things. You're like, here are our values. The right thing is this. Obeying the law is probably table stakes. It's probably what everybody does. But you're like, hey, we want to be thoughtful about the things we do and think about how it impacts the people around us, right? And so now people become something that is like, okay, here's our mission, what we're trying to do for people, for our customers. Now we're thinking about our employees and we're thinking about, are they feeling good about the work they do? Are we managing well? Are we treating people well? Because that's part of that mission. It flows from that mission that you're treating people well. Creating a culture of trust makes operations so much easier. And so now basically what we're doing, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about building a culture of trust because it makes sense to people. Triple bottom line doesn't make sense to people because now you're telling people we have a triple bottom line. Here's our mission. And then, oh, also environment, planet and or people and all this stuff. And everyone's like, what does that mean? Like how okay, but how do I make decisions on the when I'm talking with a client right now? Or a customer or whatever, right? How do I make these decisions based on this triple bottom line thing that seems so amorphous and oh, all the good things? Yeah, but how do we make decisions here at this company? And so the beauty of working with an honest company is that you're like, hey, let's just be honest about what you stand for and let's build down from there. And then it's not like we have to solve everything overnight. You don't have to be scared that someone's going to hold you accountable and tell you how to live out your values. Nobody should be doing that. Consultants like me should be helping you to ask the questions, ask the most important questions first, and then we deal with things as they come. We're not just trying to clean up everything in at that moment. Okay, now you're going to go bankrupt because you have to solve everything the way I think you should solve it. No, it's the way you think you should solve it, and I'm just going to ask you questions and make sure it makes sense, right? Because the goal is to get things moving, get things unstuck. And a lot of the ways, one of the biggest ways you do that is you know what you stand for, you know what you're about, and then all your employees are on the same page and they're like, okay, we're starting to believe this. And the cool thing about employees and people is that even if you're not like perfect the next day, right? Like you say, hey, we're just gonna look at ourselves a little bit. We're gonna, check ourselves out. We're gonna make sure our values are aligned. We're gonna make sure that we understand what we're about. We're gonna make sure that we kind of have an idea of the basis for how we make decisions. And your employees are not going to be like the next day after you have that meeting, they're going to be like, all right, well, why aren't we perfect yet? Why haven't you solved this yet? Like some pretty cynical employees are going to be like that. It doesn't mean they need to stick around, just saying. But a lot of people are going to be like, if they want to be there, they're going to be like, cool, like this feels like it's moving the right direction. And if you're clear about, hey, here's why we want to do it, and people are going to start believing that if you talk about it. And so cultures that are honest hold themselves accountable to what they say. And that's why I like working with them. These are my notes here. If they say things that aren't true, you're going to stop saying them. You're going to stop saying the stuff that's not true. If they aren't saying things that are true and important, they start saying them. So there's some values, there's some promises out there that you can start making that your competition is not making, even if they could. And we're getting into like marketing communication and stuff like that. But you start saying the things that are important and true, and which is part of it. You're making claims like telling people the truth, which means a lot of times you're telling them more. You're giving them more reasons to want to trust you and believe in you. What else? Companies like this are way easier to work with. They're easier to work with for me. Why did I say? Because they're more predictable. They're also easier to do business with. C branding. Okay, so more predictable. Let's bring this full circle back to the top. Working with companies that are honest are so let's look at companies that are dishonest. So a lot of companies I've been involved, projects I've been involved with, there's not always honesty. A lot of times there's um oh, okay, this is me. I'm like, okay, hey, it sounds like we're gonna do this. So then that looks like what? And they're like, oh, we don't know. We'll talk about it later. Or I'll be like, oh, probably looks like this, and this, right? Like these are probably the first steps, right? If we say we want to do this, then the first steps are like do this, right? Um, well, it's more complicated than that, and I don't really want to do that. All right, I want to talk about it, or I'm too busy. Let's talk about it later. And it's like, didn't we just say this was important? Didn't we just say? And there, yeah, I mean, sometimes people have to go. They have a plane to catch or something like that, right? That's fine. But if it's like, hey, let's set a time to talk about the next thing. Let's talk about next steps. Let's set a time next week to talk about how we're going to do this. And they're like, oh, okay. And then you send them an email, they never respond, or they, don't accept the meeting request or whatever. It's like, all right, you're not super serious, are you? Like, you know, you don't really want to solve these problems. Um, you're unpredictable. You want to stay unpredictable. I don't understand your motivations. You are not being honest with me. You're not predictable. And unpredictability makes people not trust you. And that's why branding is so important. That's why when you're like branding and culture are so related. I should say culture is so important because if you look at is it Pat Lencioni? His habits of shoot, what's that book called? Put it in the comments. But Pat Lencioni talks. I mean, essentially the seven habit was it of high trust organizations. Okay, I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna go find it. It's five dysfunctions of a team. Pat Lencioni. And so when you look at it, it's all based on trust, and trust a lot of times is based on um, all right, I worked at a startup. It was a tech startup, and they made hardware and software. And one of the things that we ended up, they always made these big promises and then never had any plans to fulfill the promises. We were like rock stars. We would travel to conferences and events, and I remember sitting down at a table with a bunch of Siemens employees, and they all have their Siemens, their Siemens, it was a CAD, it was what was it? It was a SolidWorks conference or something like that. Anyway, and I sat down. I was just wanted to come listen, right? And I had my like flannel shirt on because I'm like a startup guy, like working at cool startup. Anyway, I sat down and everybody stopped, and then they like looked at me like what do you have to tell us? Like what and I was like, this is the first time I'd been treated like this rock star, right? And it was weird, and I didn't like it that much. Um, and so because it was like empty, it was like what I don't have anything to say. You guys are the ones who are doing the work every day. Like you guys are the ones who I came to listen to you guys, right? And so and so it can be really empty when you don't have a process behind it. And so we were these rock stars, and we uh we didn't have trust because we didn't have process. And nobody, if you say something but you don't start doing it and you don't make plans to fulfill that, then people start seeing you as like just kind of empty. Like you don't you're not serious about doing this. You don't have a lot to offer. You lack substance. You're all talk. You're you're a hypocrite maybe, right? Because you just say these things, all the good things. You say all the good things, and then you don't do them. And so when we're talking about triple bottom line, things like that, it's like people are like, oh, so you're a company that says one thing and then does whatever it wants. And a lot of times what happens at organizations like that is that employees are put in the compromising positions because the leaders are like, hey, you have to hit all these things, hit all these metrics, and hit all these values and everything. And the employee is like, yeah, which ones? Because they're not super consistent. And I'm going to give you something, and then you're just going to you're going to move the goalposts on me, right? because you can, because you're not explicit, you're not clear about what you want. And if I bring something to you and I say, hey, these are our values, um, I can't do that because there aren't clear values, right? I can't defend myself against bureaucracy like that. And so I don't like working at places like that. And I don't like working for places who don't want to be honest about things. And so that's where I think cultures that are honest, they hold themselves accountable, those are the ones that grow. And those are my favorite kinds of companies and cultures to work in. And so, again, this is Chris Stadler. Uh, I'm talking about what um, the benefits of working with honest cultures and why that's so cool for employees. For it's they're more fun to lead those kinds of organizations and teams. And as a consultant who gets people moving, communicating, and working, is man, that's great. That's my favorite. So hope you guys have enjoyed this. Hope it helps. Give me your comments, and we'll talk to you next time.